Some independents don't want to come to your Christmas party. There's three things that really damage an organization's brand with independence. One, late payment. You can lose a huge amount of relationship value.
Welcome to another episode of Outsized Advantage. I'm Niklas Tillander, founder of Outsized, and I've got Anurag Bala with me, co-founder and head of Asia Pacific.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you as well. How are you this morning?
I'm ecstatic, excited.
Looking fit. Have you been working out?
Of course.
Yeah, good. So in today's episode, we'll be talking about value proposition to talent. So maybe to start things off, how well-defined propositions would you say companies in general have for their non-permanent employees?
Yeah, so I think as of today, most organizations have seen probably an organic growth of their independent talent community or population within the organization. So increasing demand across their businesses has seen that population grow over time. And I think previously with a smaller population, there wasn't sort of a drive or a need to feel like they needed to create some sort of different value proposition or think about this different segment of employee within their workforce. I think the higher demand, the increased population has meant that now people leaders, HR leaders, business managers are now starting to see the impact of having this different type of individual within the organization. They feel different, they operate differently, they speak differently, they have different aspirations, different expectations. And I think having experienced that and seen it, they're now starting to realize, hey, I need to acknowledge that I have a different type of individual within my organization, and therefore think about how do I both create a value proposition that attracts them in, but then also create a great experience for them while they're here so they want to come back. So I think that realization's there, but I think in terms of actually thinking that through, building and designing those value propositions, processes, even things like infrastructure, and I'll talk to you about some of those specific things, isn't there yet. It's a work in progress.
Okay, but so is it fair to say that a lot of the organizations have started to realize they need a different value proposition to independence, but not quite thought through or haven't kind of executed that yet?
Agree. Okay. Exactly right. So the acknowledgement's there, but the movement from that acknowledgement hasn't happened yet.
And is that, if you look at our different client segments, I mean, for those of you who don't know, we tend to serve either enterprise clients in different sectors or consulting firms who bring in independents into their project teams. Is there a difference between, let's say, consulting firms and financial services companies, let's say, in terms of maturity?
Yeah, for sure. So I think consulting firms by nature, in a way, run teams of individuals. So if you think about how consulting firms operate, they mobilize a group of individuals, cross-functional skills across their business to deliver a particular piece of work. That team then gets disbanded and another team is mobilized for a different piece of work. So they're actually a lot further down the line by nature in terms of understanding how to engage an individual on a more project-based type mindset, because they're working on project-based mindset all the time. So when you're a partner or a project lead in a consulting firm, your team for that period of time, in a way, is very similar to a team of independents for that period. You don't have people management responsibility for those people long-term, maybe. And so they are further along. Their demand has traditionally has come faster. So they've, I think, started to embrace the model a little bit ahead of the curve. And I think with the larger corporates, the enterprises, because they're a lot more traditional in their delivery and execution models, they build capabilities for the long term as opposed to for more defined projects. They are grappling with it a little bit further behind in terms of their maturity.
Okay, and just maybe taking a step back then in terms of an employee or a freelancer value proposition, what are the kind of the core components of such a proposition? What is it really?
Yeah, so I think you've got to think about it. You've got to take a view of the end-to-end experience. So you can't just look at it from a point of view when they're in, what am I doing? So what is the value proposition for when I have an independent within my organization? You've got to think about it end-to-end from how do I build a brand, and how do I communicate with these individuals? How do I find them? How do I assess them? How do I create an attractive business for them to want to work in? So everything from a job description versus a brief for an independent may need to be looked differently. The sources of how you find these individuals, how you assess them, I think is a really big one. So independent talent by nature is a dynamic market. Top independent talent, in general, if you engage them, you need to secure them within 2 weeks, probably. Otherwise, the next project opportunity takes them. So a 1 month or 2 month assessment process for an independent doesn't work. Putting them through rounds and rounds of interviews and tests. And
you can't put
them
studies through your normal recruitment process.
You can't do that. It doesn't work. One, because they have huge confidence in their skill sets. So in a way, they're willing to jump through a few hoops, but they won't jump through too many if they have many other opportunities. So they have high confidence in their skill. They've got choice, and they don't have time, because actually, if you think about from their perspective, if I hold off on other opportunities and wait for you for 6 weeks and you decide no, or something changes, the opportunity cost is significant to me.
Because they're not paid.
They're not paid. Yeah. Well, while they're being assessed by you, they're not getting paid for that time, right? And they're not in an existing job, potentially, right? If they're independent, they're available. So you have to understand their situation when you're looking at your assessment processes. You have to look at how you find them, how you attract them. So that's the first thing. Then you look at, onboarding, right? So I've managed to create a value proposition where an independent wants to work with me. I've created a great assessment process that aligns to, the needs of this different individual. And that assessment process is assessing on the right things, right? As opposed to assessing them on a JD, you might want to assess them based on actually what is the work that you want them to do, and do they have the skills and capability to do it? So you've got through all of that. Then you have to think about onboarding, right? So that's then looking at, do I want to put them through, again, a 3-month cycle of computer-based trainings and courses and things like that? Or do I want them to start adding value from day one? So how many, again, of those internal processes as part of onboarding do I need to put them through? Things like getting them set up for payments and getting them a laptop and getting them access to systems. As an independent with a different contractual model, some organizations really struggle with that. How do I actually give this person access to systems, because they're not a permanent employee? They're set up as maybe a vendor in our system, like a procurement individual, right? Or they're not on our traditional payroll. So things like that you think would be very easy and very simple become very difficult for big organizations to think about, especially on the security of data, on hardware issuance, getting them set up even for things like booking meetings, printing. Those sorts of things actually really disrupt independence in organization when they can't get things done. And they can't use the infrastructure. So I think as part of onboarding, again, you need to think about, hey, this individual is set up differently in our organization, potentially seen in a different risk spectrum by the organization. So how do I get them set up in a way that they can still be productive from day one? So a lot of that stuff needs to be actually sorted out before they join. When an independent comes into your organization, I think one of the shocks that organizations find is that they are actually driven from day one to just start going at the work, right? So their focus is on coming in, executing, no time wasting. So they'll actually drive organizations quite hard in terms of where is this information, how do I get to speak to this individual? And so having someone responsible for getting the best out of that individual, getting the best out of that scope of work, and setting that person up for success is, again, I think, a really important thing.
So a clearly defined person who's kind of responsible for for making sure that it's all kind of there
Yeah.
for the independent.
Yeah. Now, why have organizations traditionally gone and hired big consulting firms for project delivery? A lot of that is obviously great capability, but also there's that overlay of management that they get. So all these individuals that are doing bits and work, they get managed, they get, driven by an overall lead. When you bring in independents, they're your responsibility. You need to actually make sure you're creating an environment for them to be successful, and you're getting the most value out of that engagement. So I think having someone established for doing that. So you've got the onboarding piece, then you've got the actual day-to-day engagement, and it needs to be thought through, right? So things like even things like how much do you involve them in company activities or engagement activities or email communication, team meetings, events, outings. So as well as the work, it's about, are they treated differently? Are they invited to everything? Do they get to see everything? Do they get invited to everything? And I get there's no right answer. I think the first thing that organizations need to understand is to speak to the individual, right? Give them a choice. So I think where organizations struggle a little bit is, hey, we just need to decide this. We just need to decide they're going to get this or they're going to get this. And I think there isn't enough time trying to understand the individual, understand this different persona and what they want, and then working out, where we should engage this person and embed them into our culture, for want of a better word, or where do we, allow them to just be an individual, go home. Some independents don't want to come to your Christmas party, right? Yeah. They're not interested. They're not there to do that. They just want to come and do the work and leave and go home. They're not trying to potentially think about their next career move within the organization, right? So their motivations are different. So acknowledging that and then thinking about how you engage them is the next one. And then I think exit is another one. So as opposed to retention, so these terms that we use around acquisition of talent and retention of talent, I really hate those terms. And I think it'd be great if we try and get rid of them, because if you think about it, no human being wants to be acquired and no human being really wants to be retained.
Retained, exactly.
Right? It's a really horrible word. Who wants to be, I'm being retained? It's not very nice. What you want to do is you want to create an environment where the independent wants to stay and work with you. They want to look for another project. They're doing so well that people want to work with them and they want to work with you. So I think creating an environment where people want to work with you is much better than thinking about how do I retain this person? How do I lock them down? Right? How do I control that? Because actually you don't have control. They're an independent. So the best way to mitigate that risk of losing that high quality talent is to give them great projects, create a great infrastructure, and a great environment for them to be successful. While they're there, fundamentals are pay them on time.
On that, maybe sorry for interrupting, on paying on time, in a corporate environment with big organizations, are they generally treated as a consulting firm or a vendor, or are they treated as an employee in terms of, hey, salary on the 28th of every month and whatnot? Or is it like, hey, raise your invoice and we'll pay you when we feel like it, kind of, exaggerating a bit.
Yeah, so they are treated as a supplier would be done. So they have payment terms. Okay. So usually it would be, best case, you're looking at 30 days.
So submitting an invoice end of a month and then 1 month later.
1 month later. So if you think about, and it's really interesting because sometimes organizations lose that understanding, because if you were to tell someone at an organization, hey, you're not going to get paid until 30 days later, think about all of your outgoings in traditional life are monthly, right? Your utilities, your rent, all of that, all your subscriptions, all that stuff is coming out monthly. So for an independent, and you accept this in the market because this is the market norm at the moment, you say, okay, well, I'm going to get paid 30 days later, right? At best. So the best terms that we've seen in the market on average are 30 days. It's difficult to get better than 30 days. Some organizations are moving forward to say, hey, we'll raise the invoice on the first of the month and you get it 30 days, you get it at the end, but those are few and far between.
Which is also, I guess, depends on the nature of the contract, because sometimes you don't have fixed, it's like you invoice by the hour sometimes.
Yeah, by the hour, by the days, you don't know. So you're not paid, so you might be get paid 19 days of work 1 month, you might get paid 18. So that's some of the restrictions around
so that's on
but usually, yes, you're waiting 30 days. So it's really important to honor those payment terms, because the independent will be building their financial management around those payment terms. And it can be highly damaging. One late payment, you can lose a huge amount of relationship value out of that one late payment because of the damaging impact to that person's life outside of work.
And that, I mean, we've seen that many times, independents speak to each other, right? So for the company, it's actually quite bad because that reputation spreads in the market. Hey, this, brand so-and-so is always paying late, right?
Yeah.
So, don't...
There's three things that really damage an organization's brand with independence. One, really poor expectation management at contracting. So, we're going to get you a contract in a week later. It'll maybe take 2 more weeks. We're just getting approvals. 2 weeks later, it's with legal, right? And then suddenly, actually there's been a change. There's no budget anymore.
I forgot, procurement needs to be involved.
Yeah. So either just dragging that out, so there's opportunity cost that individual, or just not being clear, hey, this isn't going to happen, right? So they can go and move on. Independents don't mind. They just want a quick yes or a quick no. So I think that's the first thing around decision making. Understanding every day this person is waiting for you, they're not earning, right? Second one is feedback. So I think often organizations don't realize how important feedback is to an independent, both in terms of you're choosing not to work with them, but also at the end, if you work with them and there's things you'd say they've done really well and there's things that you say they can improve on, they really value it. And they don't take it negatively. They want to work on it. They want to understand, feedbacks they can improve. So I think going through, when you're assessing independence, make sure you're giving them feedback at the end of that engagement, even if you're not working with them, so they can go and work on it. And they say, hey, I was treated fairly. I didn't win it, but I was treated fairly and I got some value out of it. So that was a good interaction. So I think you can have someone walking away from a process, even if they're not selected, thinking great about your organization. And I think when they're in, key is, pay them fairly and pay them on time. Linked to payment, if you're engaging an independent for a long period, and a lot of organizations are now looking at 6, 9, 12, 18, 24-month contracts. If you have an employee in your organization working with you for 2 years, you'd expect that there may be some salary review at some point for that individual, even if you just take into account inflation, right? Inflation is impacting independence as well. So being willing and proactively saying to an independent, hey, you've been with us for a year, you've done a great, when we're going to renew your contract, let's also discuss your rate. And that doesn't happen very often, right? Because organizations, obviously, and you can understand why, are trying to lock down a particular cost, right? Agree at the best rate they can, and they want to just stick to that. But also to retain an individual and show the value they delivered, it's, I think there is justification to say, hey, let's look at your rate and rethink it. And then linked to that is development. In terms of professional development, obviously, independents are coming to the organization with off-the-shelf capabilities. So part of the upside of engaging an independent is to say, I get a capability set. I'm buying expertise, experience, and high-quality individual to come in and have an impact on my business. But that doesn't mean the organization can't look at, well, how can I help this individual develop while they're here? And it needs to be, it's therefore creating a mutually beneficial engagement, especially if you want to engage someone for the long term.
Yeah, I guess this isn't for your 1 month project, right? This is talking about 6, 12, 24 months.
Yeah. I'd say, especially if you're a longer duration, 12, 18, 24 months, to have someone in your organization for that longer period and not to give them an opportunity for personal and professional development while they're in your organization, doesn't sit that well with me in terms of,
because often these companies, like these large employers, they have very structured, professional development programs, which often then freelancers or independents they can't access. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And on one side, you can understand an organization's view as well. Well, look, I'm investing in this individual. I'm buying this person in. The cost that goes with investing in that person development when I don't know if they're going to be here, right? Because they're a contractor. But actually, I think, again, that's somewhat a misnomer that organizations feel because I have a permanent employee, they're with me forever, because actually the same way as an organization can suddenly permanent employee can hand their notice in any moment. So I think it's, if you believe you want to create a great place to work, if you believe that you want people to want to stay and be great at what they do and enjoy their experience, then is it the right thing to look at also providing some development? Now, it doesn't need to be the whole thing. Actually, it might need to be more focused, but understanding what that person might want and seeing if you can add some value, I think it's worthwhile doing.
And flips also just, often these specialists coming in, they can be part of the professional development programs. They can actually help companies in terms of delivering some of that development because they have other experiences that the permanent staff would benefit from, right? If so that could be another kind of way of.
Well, that's a great point. Actually, what we've been seeing recently is organisations in the scope of work actually adding in a bullet there saying in-house capability building as part of the scope of work, to say, let's say you're going in
knowledge transfer,
exactly. So let's say you're going in as an agile coach, or you're going in as a data scientist. Part of the remit of your job is to enhance the capabilities of the in-house team. Some organisations even bring the independent in to then build out that capability set within the organisation, so they can have more in-house capabilities. So I think that's a really great point in terms of that give and take. Hey, we'll give you some opportunity to learn some skills and some expertise, but also you can deliver some of that as part of your scope and increases the scope of work for you. So I think that's quite a nice way of thinking about it. So if we think about that, so there's the hey, they're with me, I'm investing in their development, I'm paying them fairly, I'm paying them on time. Then you've got the end of the engagement.
Before we go to that, sorry, I had a question on the kind of early phases in terms of the payments. We talked about the payment terms, pay them on time and fairly. On the pay them fairly bit, how do companies think about what's fair pay for an independent, and how should they think about what's fair pay for an independent?
Yeah, it's a constant discussion. In our markets, I would say that proper benchmarking for different skills in different markets, different experience levels and different locations has not yet been formulated fully. So it's not a formalized known. So in other more developed markets where this sector has been around for much longer, you can pretty much know for this skill, for this sort of project, I know I'm going to pay between X and Y. I think in our markets, there's still a lot of variance. And why that is because there's still a lot of immaturity. People don't know what to charge. Organizations don't know what to pay. That's the first thing to say. Second thing to say is there's a lot of variables that go into an independence pricing that sometimes organizations don't reflect on. So the duration of an engagement, that will impact what an independent may want to charge. The location, linked to cost of living, right? But also, hey, if I'm needing to travel, etc., right, that could impact. The nature of the project, independents are focused on wanting to do great work. They're attracted by the project as much as the rate. So if you can create a really interesting project scope and a really interesting environment to execute that in, often independents are willing to flex their rate. The nature of the work. So let's take an M&A project. That's going to be, your day is going to be 16 hours a day, not 8 hours a day. So a high intense, high expectation type project, short duration, is going to cost you more, right? Because an independent's having to give a huge amount of more time and value and emotional energy into that engagement. So they will look to be compensated aligned to that, right? Availability. So sometimes if an independent hasn't done a project for 3-4 months, maybe they're willing to negotiate on their rates. If they're high in demand and they've got lots and lots of choice, maybe they'll increase their rate. Skills, different skills drive different rates, experience level, obviously. So there's many variables, and sometimes organizations just say, well, why is that different to that? Or I engaged this person previously, why is the rate now different? But understanding these variables are coming into play.
So would companies, would a starting point for some organizations be, hey, I'm looking at what's the permanent employee costs, divide that by 12 to get a monthly rate, or I mean, is it that crude sometimes?
Yeah, so sometimes that's what an organization will do. So what would I pay, what am I paying the individual that's doing this full time, and I'll just work that out a day rate model. And why does that not work? It doesn't work for a number of reasons. So your independent isn't getting any of the employee benefits, right, that you'd be offering a permanent employee. So there's no health benefits, there's no protection, there's no holiday pay, there's no sick pay. So they're losing no, if there are car allowances, any other allowances that you offer your permanent employees, they're not entitled to those bonus payments. Often it's very rare, actually, unfortunately, for independents to get rate increases mid-project. So there's no promotion, there's none of that. So they're losing out on that. But there's also a risk premium that maybe isn't always accounted for, which is, hey, this individual, when they leave your project, may not be on another project for 3 months. Right? Their notice periods are usually a lot shorter than a permanent employee. So they've got to build up this runway. They don't have any benefits. There's usually no pension or savings plan associated. They have to manage all of that themselves. If they're sick, they don't get paid. When they finish your project and they haven't lined up another project, they don't get paid. So there is a risk premium associated with an independent. But you're getting the flexibility upside of that. So what you're gaining is an organization, and sometimes organizations don't price this in, which is a lot of that overhead cost of a permanent employee is not being accounted to this individual. So I need to take that into account. Also, I haven't spent 6 months trying to hire this person, right? So the time and the cost and the risk associated with permanent hiring isn't there.
Yeah, you can start deliver a project within weeks, as opposed to within like 3-6 months.
Exactly. And if things change for you, you don't have to hold that person and keep paying that person for 3-4 months of their notice period. You're able to have that flexibility as well. So you're paying for that flexibility, you're paying for that risk premium, you're paying for that speed, you're paying for that quality. And so I think, again, that is some of what we try and do when we have conversations, is try and bring some.
What we do, correct me if I'm wrong, often we do, we have the data, right? So we worked on thousands of projects in different skills areas and markets, so we have a pretty good general idea of what a certain person should be charging, right? And we help freelancers and clients.
Yeah, and I think our job has to be around creating those benchmarks.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing with the anyone who's interested. We have the annual and mid-year talent on demand reports, where we kind of go into that, and we've got more details for clients. Yeah. So I think you were moving to the kind of the last section of the value proposition.
Yeah. So thinking about, as you're coming to the end of the contract term, you have an independent. I think I'd always advise clients, don't let it get too late. An independent, towards the last segment of their contract with you, they're thinking about their next project, and if you haven't spoken to them, then you have to assume that that's happening. So the first thing is, hey, engage the individual early about your intentions, about if there's other opportunities within your organization or for the project to extend. Most independents will love to stay. For them, actually stay, extend, do another project. It is much easier as long as you've created a good environment, rather than moving and trying to find the next project. So I think getting in there early around your intentions, so you lose the individual when you don't want to. But let's say it gets to the point where both sides are happy for the contract to end. If you've had a great experience with that individual, what you want to do is you want to create a brand. My view is you want to create a brand ambassador out of that individual. You want that individual to go. Most independents are highly well networked within the independent community. So an independent marketeer will know within their geographic spectrum they operate in, will know a lot of the great independents within marketing, right? So what you don't want to do is damage that reputation within the market. So restrict, therefore, your ability to bring in high quality talent. And those reputations can be built up very quickly by influential people. So I think, one, make sure it's a positive exit. How can you do that? Well, one, give feedback, right? Also, think about allowing the individual to leverage the experience they've had with you to help them win other projects. So not having clauses that say, hey, you can't disclose that you worked with me, for a contract. You can't use my logo on your LinkedIn profile or in your CV. You can't talk about the project you've done. Obviously, there's confidentiality and IP that's there, that's protected. But being willing for that individual to leverage the experience they've had with you to win their next project, I think it's really important for that individual and to treat them them fairly.
Independents, succeed in their future career. Basically, don't inhibit them by putting weird restrictions.
Yeah, exactly. Allow them to be successful, and then they'll want to come back. So I would say the best way to think about it is to create a feeling that, hey, maybe you don't have a project for them now, but you want to create a mindset in them, I can't wait for that organization to reach out to me again. And when I get that call or that email, I'm going to answer it. Or I'm going to try and make myself available for them because I had such a great experience. Or if you reach out to me and say, hey, I haven't got a project for you, but I've got another project. Do you know anyone? And they ask for that referral, they're willing to actually give it to you. So as an organization, you want to create that feeling in the individual that they want to help you and that they want to come back and work with you. And the biggest question is, would you work with this organization again? And you want that to be yes. So yeah, a really positive exit, create a brand ambassador. And I think that allows you to then make sure you're not turning off access to great talent.
Perfect. Thank you. So just to wrap it up then, maybe in terms of, if you're an organization, you have a great value proposition for your permanent employees, how do you start, the work in terms of defining that value proposition for independent staff?
So if I was in a people leadership role within an organization today, the first thing I would do is I wouldn't work on the assumption that it's just a case of rolling out what I have over here and giving it to independents. That's the first assumption that I wouldn't make. The first step I'd take is if I already have independents within my organization, get them in a room, do some one-to-one interviews, do some digging, or we can provide you with some insights because we do this day in, day out, but speak to them, understand them, and you'll quickly be able to identify differences. So, the motivations, what they want from you, what they expect from you, what they need, their challenges are different to a permanent employee. So understanding that first is the first point. And then building your value proposition off the back of that. I think that's really the best place for them to start. And most organizations will have this community within their workforce. So it's getting them together and understanding them.
I think that's a really good way to summarize. Thank you. And until next time.
See you again soon.
See you.